Now relax slowly where you lie and feel all the tension in your shoulders flow away through your arms and legs. Let all the hurry and rush of the day quietly recede. Nothing is more valuable than you, and no thought is more important than your peace. The only thing you need to focus on is the soft weight of your blankets and the steady rhythm of every deep breath you take. The doors are closed, the lights are out, and you are slowly drifting back to that silent snowy night from years ago. Now picture yourself in the heart of that small log cabin in the middle of that freezing winter night. The air outside wraps the surroundings in a knife-sharp cold, and from where you lie, you examine the structure of your shelter. These walls were typically made of single-layer logs, hastily hewn during the wild, difficult times of the West. While their thickness offered some insulation, this simple, monolithic structure was quite limited in its ability to retain heat compared to the modern era's multi-layered, high-performance insulation materials. The log material itself, due to its density, stores heat slowly. It could hold the warmth from the stove lit during the day for a while. But throughout the night, the sub-zero temperatures outside gradually drew that stored heat back, and this thermal battle progressed in parallel with your body's effort to stay warm during sleep. The biggest source of heat loss wasn't the logs themselves, but the joints between them. As these logs were stacked on top of each other, they left irregular gaps due to their natural curves and cutting imperfections. These gaps were filled with chinking, a mixture of mud, clay, straw, or small stone fragments. The quality of this chinking directly determined the cabin's success in fighting the cold. No matter how meticulously applied, it tended to crack and crumble over time in the dry winter air. Lying in your bed now, you can feel the touch of the thin, cold air currents seeping through those cracks on your skin. This draft acts as a continuous air bridge, carrying the warm air from the room outside. Compared to the general conditions of the era, this thermal performance was much lower than that of the framed, plastered, or stone-walled houses seen in more established coastal colonies. In the West, the goal was to survive the first winter. Perfect insulation was secondary. While a single-layer log wall offered high wind resistance, it unfortunately did not have high thermal resistance. Keeping the stove constantly burning was essential, because the energy it radiated had to be just a fraction more than the energy the walls lost. Otherwise, the indoor temperature would continuously drop. The logs on the coldest side of the cabin, especially, would begin to dampen due to intense condensation caused by the temperature difference between outside and inside. As the logs became damp, their insulating abilities decreased even further, since water conducts heat much faster than dry air. When you get up from your bed and touch that damp wall, the cold sensation tells you that the logs are now acting not as an insulator, but as a conductor of cold. This single-layer structure also does very little to block sound. You can hear every detail of the howling storm outside and the snow hitting the ground. This isn't just a thermal problem, it's also an acoustic challenge. The ease with which sound passes through is a sign that thermal energy also passes through easily. Even though they are physically dense and thick, the gaps between the logs act as thermal bridges. These thermal difficulties were a silent, physical enemy that constantly threatened to disrupt the sleep of the Wild West settler. Every creak, every slight gust of wind was actually a warning that the freezing winter outside was infiltrating their home. This primitive shelter only provides you with a sense of protection. But providing real warmth remains the endless, shared task of you and the stove. That icy air seeping through the tiny cracks between the logs is the most concrete reminder of the simple engineering and struggle for survival in those days. Now you slowly lower your body onto that bed cover sewn from coarse fabric, the straw mattress, as it was called in that era. The surface you feel beneath you bears no relation to the smooth, silent foam texture offered by modern mattresses. Instead, there is an organic pile of dried pieces of nature that talks, rustles, and creaks with your every movement. This mattress's filling is swamp grass gathered from nearby creek banks or dried wheat stalks left over after harvest. While appearing uncomfortable and primitive at first glance, this material actually forms the most strategic defensive line against the freezing chill rising from the floor or the wooden bed frame on those merciless Wild West winter nights. Each stalk of these dry grasses and reeds is like a hollow tube, and the stagnant air trapped inside these tubes creates a perfect insulating layer according to the laws of physics. When you lie on it, your body's weight crushes these stalks, and the millions of tiny air pockets between them prevent your body heat from escaping downwards and the cold from below from rising up. Looking at the luxury standards of that era, the wealthy in eastern cities or Europe slept on beds stuffed with soft goose down. However, down loses all its insulating properties when wet and takes days to dry. In contrast, these hard, durable reeds beneath you are a more resilient, and most importantly, practical solution that could be replaced at any moment with fresh ones, suited to the humid and variable weather conditions on the frontier. As time passes in the quiet of the night, you notice that the mattress's biggest flaw is its quick loss of resistance to compression. The points under your hips and shoulders gradually compress and thin over the hours, weakening the insulation in those areas. This thinning allows the cold from below to sneak in insidiously through those spots. Therefore, fluffing the mattress before sleep, reaching inside and mixing up the dry grasses, was a sleep ritual for people of that time. With every mixing, the dusty, earthy scent that spreads through the room reminds you once again that you are in the heart of nature, far from civilization. This scent, rather than being bothersome, instills a primitive sense of security from being close to the earth. The material inside the mattress gradually breaking down into dust creates a fine layer of dust seeping out through the cover's pores. But even this dust was considered a factor that balanced humidity in the dry winter air. Most migrants heading west tried to prevent the sharp ends of the grasses from touching their skin by spreading the cotton quilts they brought with them over these reed mattresses. But no matter how many layers you spread, the rustle of those dry grasses, that monotonous, rhythmic sound accompanying you every time you turn during the night, is an inseparable part of the winter sleep. This sound is a lullaby that muffles the howl of the wind outside, whispering that life continues inside. This insulation method is a product of the ingenuity born of scarcity in that era. In months when access to expensive materials was impossible and trade routes were closed by snow, nature's simplest waste, dry grass, becomes the most valuable treasure protecting you from freezing. This simple pile beneath you is actually a biological battery that preserves your body heat, ensuring you survive until morning. In the coldest hour of the night, as you take refuge in the warmth of the air trapped within those dry reeds, you feel in every cell how this simple engineering quietly protects your life. With all the day's weariness weighing on your shoulders, the last obstacle you must overcome, perhaps the one that most challenges your will, stands before you, the merciless cold of your ice-cold bed. Even if the stove in the corner of the room is dying down, the sheets inside your bed seem to await you with a temperature no different from the snowdrift outside. In the poorly insulated houses of the Wild West, getting into bed meant not a transition to comfortable rest, but an abrupt thermal shock battle between your body and that freezing linen or cotton fabric. That's why your final ritual before surrendering to sleep is to apply primitive but effective heating methods to turn this cold war slightly in your favor. The starring role in this ritual is usually played by a smooth-surfaced river stone or, if available, a brick fragment, warmed all day beside or on the stove. This stone, which absorbs heat from the stove's cast iron surface, is your most loyal nighttime companion. But since placing this stone directly against the sheets could mean burning the fabric or scalding your skin, you must swaddle it carefully. You push this ember-like mass, wrapped in a thick, perhaps worn-out wool sweater or several layers of flannel cloth, deep into the bed, into that dark tunnel where your feet will go. The heat radiating from the area where you place the stone slowly dries the moisture from the sheets and disperses the cold air molecules, creating a small, invisible bubble of warm air there. While in the more affluent and settled homes of the East, the elegance of servants using long-handled brass bed-warming pans filled with coals, bedwarmers, was a symbol of refinement. Pure functionality reigned supreme in frontier life. If you were lucky and had a glazed ceramic hot water bottle with a tightly corked stopper in your home, that was considered a luxury. Filled with boiling water, this heavy ceramic bottle provided a softer, moister warmth than a stone. The texture of the ceramic, the soft thock sound it made as it slid between the sheets, and the humid warmth it radiated felt like a balm to your skin cracking in the dried winter air. However, the risk of leakage always created unease, so stones or heavy cast iron flatrons heated on the hearth, known for their reliable, dry heat, were often preferred. In that first moment you get into bed, your body involuntarily tenses because the top part of the bed is still cold. But when you stretch your feet and touch that pre-warm zone, the signals reaching your brain instantly change. This artificial warmth spreading upward from the soles of your feet rapidly increases blood circulation and allows your trembling muscles to relax. This method is incomparable to the uninterrupted warmth offered by modern electric blankets until morning. This is a diminishing warmth. The stone or water bottle gradually transfers its heat to your body and the bed, slowly cooling over the hours. The purpose of this temporary heat source is not to keep you warm all night, but only to help your body reach a level where it can generate its own heat during the critical 15 to 20 minutes before falling asleep. The faint burnt smell from the heated wool wrapping and the weight of the stone give you a feeling of safety. As your feet warm, your mind also begins to detach from the reality of the freezing room. No matter how fierce the storm outside, in that small heated cave under the quilt, you surrender yourself to the arms of the night with this short-lived but priceless comfort offered by primitive technology. Even if the stone begins to cool, you have already crossed into the realm of dreams. In the deepest, most silent hour of the night, what wakes you in the middle of your dreams is not a sound, but rather the absence of a familiar sound. The thin, ominous crackling of metal cooling has replaced the reassuring roar of the stove. The air inside the room has grown heavy like an invisible block of ice, and the tip of your nose outside the quilt begins to sting. This moment is the mandatory stove watch etched into the body clock of everyone living through Wild West winters, whether they wanted it or not. Leaving the security cocoon of your warm bed is the greatest test of your will. But letting that pile of iron die out completely means facing frozen water buckets, frost-covered windows in the morning, or even risking hypothermia. When your bare feet touch the icy wooden floor, a current like an electric shock rapidly climbs from your cold heels up through your entire body, making you shiver. Walking in the dark towards that cast-iron beast, the stove, in the middle of the room, you fumble to find the poker and coal bucket. Looking at the heating technology of that era, these closed combustion stoves offered a revolutionary efficiency compared to old-style open fireplaces. But unlike modern automatic boilers, they were like insatiable babies, constantly in need of human intervention. With great care, you open the stove's heavy cast-iron door millimeter by millimeter so its hinges don't squeak. The last flickering red ember gasping among the ashes inside is the only light source in the room, whispering to you that hope is not yet extinguished. If you are lucky and your region is near railroad networks, you might be using anthracite coal as fuel. Unlike wood, coal provides denser, longer-lasting heat. But it requires a stronger airflow to burn, clearing the hardened clinker and ash accumulated at the bottom, which blocks airflow. With the poker requires surgical attention. Stir too much, and you can smother the weak flame. Stir too little, and the new coal won't catch. The loud, metallic clank as you pour those black, shiny pieces from the coal bucket into the stove's mouth is the noisiest moment tearing through the night's silence. Hearing this sound, you listen for a moment to see if other family members have woken up. But everyone is so accustomed to this routine that they continue their sleep from where they left off. After adding the new coal, adjusting the stove's air intake dampers is a matter of true skill. If you leave the damper too open, the coal will flare up and burn out within an hour, and you'll wake up cold again before morning. If you leave it too closed, the fire, starved of oxygen, will suffocate, and poisonous gases could leak into the room. Striking this balance, the banking technique, required experience. In that era, fuel, especially for those living in treeless plains, was as valuable as gold. Therefore, the duration of heat each piece of coal would give was mentally calculated. You wait by the stove until you hear that muffled whump sound, indicating the flame inside has met the new fuel and regained strength. When you return to your bed, your body has thoroughly absorbed the cold in that short time. As you get under the blankets, you begin to shiver to warm up. But as your ears pick up the expansion clicks from the stove's body and the hum of hot air passing through the pipes, your mind relaxes. These sounds are the herald that the danger has passed, that a new heat cycle lasting until morning has begun. As you close your eyes, even though the sulphurous, sooty smell of the air in the room burns your throat, This smell comes to you like the scent of survival in the wild, harsh, heavy, but safe. Now, in the darkness of the night, you are part of that cramped yet vitally safe crowd within your bed. In the freezing winters of the Wild West, the concept of privacy gave way to a more primitive and necessary one: collective warmth. What you feel when you get under the quilt is not the sense of freedom in modern, spacious beds. On the contrary, it is a profound peace from the physical pressure created by family members or travel companions lying to your right and left. This crowding is the last line of defense woven from flesh and bone against the lethal -20 degrees Celsius cold outside. When you press your back against the person next to you, no air gap remains between you. This contact is thermal conductivity at its most efficient. While a person sleeping alone continuously loses body heat to cold sheets and air pockets, here, the combination of multiple bodies creates a massive biological radiator. The air under the quilt is perhaps 20 degrees warmer than the room temperature outside. And this warmth is maintained not by external energy, but solely by the heat produced by your shared metabolisms. Every breath you take further warms this microclimate under the quilt. Looking at the architectural conditions of the period, for large families living in typically one-room cabins, having separate beds was both economically impossible and thermodynamically illogical. Furniture was a difficult and expensive luxury to bring from the East. Therefore, the only large bed in the house became a life island at night, where all family members took refuge, sometimes next to the parents, sometimes children curled at the foot. This closeness provided not only physical warmth but also deep psychological calm. While the sound of howling wolves outside, creaking trees, or the threatening roar of the wind could be frightening to a mind sleeping alone, hearing the regular, calm breathing of the person next to you sends your brain the message that all is well, you are not alone. This is a reflection of humanity's herd instinct carried since the cave era. Feeling the heartbeat or breathing rhythm of the person next to you also slows and synchronizes your own biological rhythm. The sense of security you feel as you fall asleep renders even the fact that the stove might have gone out unimportant. Because you know that the bodies to your right and left are living shields that will prevent you from freezing until morning. Sometimes the smallest or weakest in the bed was placed in the middle to keep them warm. If you are on the edge, you feel the cold air on your back, but your face and chest are turned toward the family's warmth. This position is a silent expression of sacrifice and protection. Although moving in that cramped space is difficult, this stillness helps your body conserve energy. Surrendering to a deep, heavy sleep without moving is the best way to prepare for the difficult, cold start of the morning. Under the weight of the quilt and the presence of the bodies beside you, the feeling of being crushed actually sweeps you into a timeless peace within a warm, dark cocoon, isolated from all the world's dangers. In the later hours of the night, as the stove's heat begins to diminish, you notice that invisible, insidious enemy circulating in the room, the draft. No matter how thick the log walls are, the raw wood materials used in building the house shrink and contract in the dry, freezing cold of winter. This natural shrinkage creates fine cracks, millimeter-sized gaps in door frames and window casings that are invisible during the day but felt at night. While you try to sleep peacefully in your bed, the wind seeping through these thin cracks hits your face or exposed neck like a whistling, needle-like cold current. This is where the primitive but effective insulation technology of the Wild West comes into play: oiled cloth strips. These cloths are usually strips torn from cotton shirts too worn to wear or from flour sacks. But what sets them apart from ordinary rags is the material they are impregnated with. These cloths are dipped in melted animal fat, tallow, lard, beeswax, or, if available, linseed oil. The oil saturates the fabric's weave, sealing the pores, making it heavier and airtight. You are now experiencing that final check moment before going to bed at night. With these heavy, slightly sticky, sharp-smelling cloth wads in your hand, you come to the window. You tightly plug the gaps around the edges of that thin, wind-shaken glass, or oiled paper window, with these cloths. When the oil comes into contact with the cold, it hardens, freezing the cloth piece in place like a putty, molding to the shape of the crack. In a world without modern silicone sealants or rubber weather stripping, these oiled cloths were the only barrier separating the home's interior atmosphere from the outside world. When you push the cloths into the wide gap under the door threshold with a knife blade or your fingers, you feel the air circulation in the room suddenly stop. Until then, the candle flame dancing and flickering nervously in the room stabilizes and stands upright. This visual change is the clearest proof that the insulation is working. The room's acoustics change too. The wind's thin whistle is cut off, replaced by a deep, sound-absorbing silence. Of course, this method has a cost. In the moment, the heavy, sour smell of tallow mixed with the stove's soot dominates. But for the people of that time, this smell was not an unpleasant filth. On the contrary, it was the smell of safety. Because if that smell was there, the cracks were sealed, the cold was outside. Additionally, when windows were sealed this way, they were effectively shut for the rest of the winter. This meant the air inside the house was trapped for months. Still, when you return to your bed and lay your head on the pillow, the still air you feel makes all the effort worthwhile. You no longer feel that insidious wind on your face. The air inside the room is motionless and warm. It's as if you've entered a giant jar and tightly closed the lid. You are completely isolated from the chaos of the outside world. This airtight feeling erases the last crumbs of anxiety in your mind and slowly pushes you toward that deep, dark sleep pit, untouched by the wind. When you tightly close your eyes and the last candle in the room is extinguished, the only sense sharpening among your senses is your hearing. You no longer see. You only listen. In the absolute darkness of the room, you focus on the sound of the one presence that does not abandon you, the stove. This sound is the only evidence shouting that life still continues within the deep and frightening silence of the Wild West. Unlike the constant, soulless fan noises, refrigerator hums, or traffic noise you're accustomed to in the modern world, the stove's sound is alive, variable, and speaks to you in an archaic language. The sounds of the fire burning are like a complex orchestra. First, you hear the moment a freshly added log of wood meets the flame. The sharp crack sound as the dry wood fibers expand and burst with sudden heat, snapping like a whip within the silence. But this sound is not startling. On the contrary, it is reassuring. Because it is the herald that the fuel has ignited, that heat is being produced. If the wood burning is resinous pine, the boiling and bursting of resin pockets creates a continuous, rhythmic crackling sound. This sound sends a cheerful yet soporific signal to your mind, as if tiny fireworks are popping inside the stove. If harder woods like oak or walnut are burning, the sound is deeper. A deep, hoarse hum and the soft rustle of slowly collapsing embers are heard. This auditory feast also has a mechanical side, the song of the metal. As the cast iron stove heats up with the intense heat inside, it expands, and as it cools, it contracts. This physical change creates tensions at the molecular level of the metal, releasing as metallic rings and clicks heard in the silent night. Lying motionless in your bed, listening to the stove's metallic breathing creates a hypnotic effect. Each click is like an irregular metronome measuring the passage of time. As your mind tries to follow these sounds, your thoughts slow down. Your logic disengages, leaving only the pure act of listening. This is the ancestor of modern white noise machines. But this sound is not artificial. It is completely natural and is the sound of the struggle for survival. The sounds of the outside world, however, are frightening. The howling wind, branches hitting the corners of the house, or the distant sound of a coyote. The stove's strong, determined burning sound draws a protective curtain over these chaotic and threatening outside noises. The sound of the fire is an authority saying, "This place is safe, this place is warm, nothing can enter here." This sound touches the same point in humanity's genetic memory as the sense of security given by fires lit at cave entrances thousands of years ago. Back then, fire kept wild animals away. Now, it keeps the freezing cold and darkness of the Wild West at bay. When the sound of the fire diminishes, when the flames give way to a bed of embers, the sounds change. Those aggressive crackles cease, replaced by a much finer, almost whispered sound of subsidence. The faint friction sound of embers collapsing onto each other is the signal of your transition into the deepest stage of sleep. Now the stove, too, is falling asleep with you. Within the security cocoon created by these sounds, your mind is cleansed of all the harshness of the outside world. As the fire inside the stove, a living sentinel standing watch over you, warming not only your room but also your dreams, lulls you with its lullaby of sounds. You slowly and irrevocably surrender to the most peaceful arms of unconsciousness. As evening draws to a close, your eyes focus on the smoothest gray river stones resting right beside the fireplace or stove. These stones, which have waited silently at the edge of the fire all day long, are not just mineral pieces. They are energy stores that will ensure you survive the night safely. You placed them there in the early morning hours when the fire was first stoked, and now it is time to reclaim the intense heat they have absorbed from the fire all day. You put on thick leather gloves or use your iron tongs to take these stones from beside the fire because they are currently too hot to touch, nearly as hot as embers. When you feel the weight of the stone in your hand, you know this weight is not just a physical mass but also a vessel of concentrated warmth. The most delicate part of this ritual is the packaging process before placing the stone in the bed. If you were to place this incandescent stone directly between the sheets unprotected, it could scorch or even ignite the linen fabric in seconds, potentially starting a fire that could reduce your home to ashes. Therefore, you take an old piece of wool blanket, perhaps thin from countless washings, or a thick flannel cloth. Placing the stone in the center of the cloth, you swaddle it tightly like a baby. When the fabric first touches the hot stone, a faint, dry smell of scorched wool reaches your nose. In the modern world, this smell might be considered a concerning signal, but in the Wild West, it is the smell of preparation being done correctly, the smell of safety. It is the most tangible proof that your bed is beginning to warm. Carrying this warm package in your arms as you walk toward your bed, you feel the heat it radiates hitting your chest. Lifting the quilt, you push the stone package deep into the bed, into that icy, dark void where your feet will reach. Considering the conditions of the era, this method is actually an engineering feat combining nature's simplest physics principles with humanity's quest for comfort. In the wealthy cities of the East, copper bed warmers or ceramic bottles were fragile and expensive. But this granite or basalt stone gathered from a riverbed is unbreakable, free, and releases heat much more slowly and evenly than metal, lasting until morning. While the stone lies motionless inside the bed, it begins to dry the cold air and damp sheets around it, acting like an oven. When you get into bed and press your feet against that cloth-wrapped hard mass, what you feel is not softness but an unyielding hardness. Yet this hardness feels sweeter to you than the softest pillow in the world. The warmth entering through the soles of your feet thaws your frozen toes while you feel blood being pumped upward to your calves and knees. This stone creates a heat island within the bed. Instead of spending your own energy to warm the bed, your body absorbs the energy from this external source. This thermal support is the most critical key allowing your metabolism to slow down and shift into sleep mode. As the night progresses, the stone's heat diminishes very slowly, synchronized with your body temperature. The searing heat of the first hours gives way to a warm support by midnight, and by dawn, it is merely a tepid stone. But by that time, you have long since fallen into deep sleep. The stone's cooling is a natural process that progresses in parallel with your sleep cycle. Unlike the artificial, constant heat of modern electric blankets, this stone is natural and, like the night, slowly falls asleep itself. Finding that cold stone at your feet in the morning is a silent reminder of how you survived the night. That stone absorbed the cold in your place and kept you warm. In the final stage of preparing to get into bed, you confront the reality that your body's and bed's existing insulation may be insufficient for the approaching night. The thermometer outside is rapidly falling, and the heat in your room grows thinner with each passing minute. This is where the practical intelligence born of scarcity in the Wild West comes into play, and the heavy, coarse clothes that protected you all day transform to continue their duty at night. The sheepskin overcoat you take off, the thick wool jacket, or the leather vest, instead of hanging them aside, you decide to use them as strategic insulation layers. These garments are no longer just clothing, they become building blocks of survival architecture. You begin to lay these clothes on top of your bed, particularly over the areas where your body loses the most heat. You usually place the heaviest piece at the foot of the bed. That heavy wool overcoat that battled mud and snow all day now adds weight to the quilt over your feet, completely cutting off air circulation there. The coat's weight presses the quilt down onto your feet, thus closing even the smallest gap through which warm air inside could escape. This mechanical pressure gives you a kind of cocoon feeling. The extra weight over your feet also psychologically instills a sense of security. Looking at the textile products of the era, unlike the lightness of modern synthetic fabrics, the clothing of that time was made from pure wool, fur, and thick cotton weaves. These materials are heavy, coarse, and have a dense texture. While the fur of a fur coat creates an additional insulation layer with the air trapped between its hairs, the leather itself acts as a windproof barrier. Lying in your bed, you might feel the sleeves of the jacket you spread over yourself falling aside or the collar touching your face. This touch carries the fatigue of the day and the scent of the outside, soot, sweat, horse, and tobacco. But this scent is the scent of your livelihood, and in that freezing cold, everything belonging to you is valuable. This method is also a clever preparation to mitigate the first shock upon waking in the morning. If you had hung your clothes on a chair in a corner of the room, you would find them frozen stiff and icy in the morning. Putting that cold garment on your warm body meant starting the day shivering. But by placing them on your bed, or sometimes even taking them under the quilt to warm with your body heat, your clothes to wear in the morning remain lukewarm. Your body heat passing through the quilt's weave during the night keeps the overcoat on top at a moderate temperature as well. This pile of clothes on your bed is your last line of defense when the stove goes out and the house turns into an icebox. Where the quilt falls short, your father's old jacket becomes a shield protecting you from shivering. The buttons or clasps on the clothes may sometimes jingle when you move at night, or the metal parts may touch your skin faintly. But these minor discomforts pale in comparison to the vital warmth they provide. Under the layers of these covers, you feel as if you've hidden under a mountain, heavy, motionless, and completely detached from the outside world. This weight slows your breathing, deepens it, and allows you to fall asleep, integrated with your clothes, in the warmest shelter of that cold winter night. Now, direct your mind to the inevitable cycle of the seasons, and the profound effect this cycle has on the human body. In the Wild West, when winter came, it wasn't just the weather that changed, the flow of time shifted as well. The endless long days of summer, with the sun hanging overhead for hours and work stretching from dawn to twilight, gave way to a completely different rhythm with the arrival of winter. As a person living in that era, you had to adapt to this new sleep pattern imposed by nature, not according to the ticks of a modern clock, but according to the pale movements of the sun. In winter, the sun hid behind the horizon early, at an hour that could be considered afternoon, and the world was plunged into a long darkness lasting 14 to 16 hours. In a world where artificial light, gas lamps and candles, was expensive and limited, darkness meant it was time for sleep. These long winter nights triggered what was standard for people of that time but forgotten by modern humans, segmented or biphasic sleep. You would go to bed right after dinner, perhaps around 7 or 8 p.m., before the stove's heat diminished. This was the first sleep phase, a deep, heavy slumber. But around midnight, maybe at 2 a.m., your body would naturally awaken. This awakening wasn't a sleep disorder but a natural break. In the pitch-dark room, you would check the stove's embers, maybe take a sip of water, listen to the wind, or simply lie quietly in bed, lost in thought. This interim period was the watch hour, a time of mental clarity, remembered dreams, and listening to the silent wisdom of the night. After this wakefulness lasting about an hour, the second sleep would begin and last until morning, until daybreak. The single block, short, and intense sleep of summer was thus split in two and spread across the night in winter. This change is also linked to your body entering energy-saving mode. The reduction of outdoor work in winter, the freezing of fields, and animals being brought into barns confined you to the house. Decreased physical activity and cold air slow your metabolism, prompting you to sleep more, almost like a semi-hibernation. While you could start the day refreshed with 5 to 6 hours of sleep in summer, spending over 10 hours in bed in winter was a defense mechanism your body developed against the cold. The extra hours spent under the quilt minimized calorie expenditure and helped preserve your body heat. Waking up in the morning bore no resemblance to the vibrant, bird-chirping awakenings of summer. Since sunrise was delayed in winter, your biological clock struggled to wake. The gray, dim light inside the room and the deep silence outside magnetically pulled you to bed. You crawled out of bed with difficulty, unlike jumping out at the first light of summer sun. This heaviness was the spirit of the season, a heaviness whispering that while nature slept, you didn't need to be fully awake either. Winter sleep was not just bodily rest, it was a spiritual introspection, a force slowing down. And now you surrender yourself to the peace of those long nights, to that timelessness where you didn't need to hurry. In the pitch-black darkness of night, when the sense of sight is completely useless, the only way to perceive the world is to listen to the sound of that massive, furious nature crashing against the walls of your log cabin. Curled under your quilt up to your chin, the acoustic environment created by the blizzard outside traps you in a terrifying, yet strangely peaceful, pool of sound unlike anything the modern world could experience. On the vast, endless plains of the Wild West, there is no obstacle, no building or forest block to break the wind's speed. Therefore, the wind comes with all the force gathered from miles away and hits your small, one-room shelter directly. This collision resonates inside the house as a deep roar, as if a giant hand has taken the house in its palm and is shaking it. The corners of the house act like instruments that alter the sharpness of the wind. As the wind passes through the gaps between the logs at the four corners, its tone shifts from a thick rumble to a thin, high-pitched whistle. This whistle rises and falls with the storm's intensity, like a never-ending, melancholy, monotonous melody composed by nature. Lying in your bed, you feel every change in the frequency of this sound. The vacuum effect created by the wind passing over the top of the chimney changes the sound of the flame inside the fireplace. The fire suddenly flares up, then subsides again. The whoosh sound inside the chimney is like the house breathing, regular and hypnotic. Unlike the silence of modern concrete buildings, the wooden structure is alive and converses with the storm. You hear the creaks of the wooden frame under the tons of snow load on your roof and the lateral pressure of the wind. The dry pine logs rubbing against each other produce solid creak sounds, or the fine groans of fibers under tension are proof the house is standing. These sounds don't frighten you. On the contrary, they remind you that the house is standing, that it continues to protect you. Like the sounds from the hull of a ship in the middle of the ocean, these creaks convince you that you are on a safe voyage. The snow brought by the storm hitting the window or wall has a completely different texture. Unlike the splattering, wet sound of rain, frozen snow crystals hitting the window produce a dry, gritty, friction-filled sound, as if someone outside is throwing handfuls of fine sand against the wall. This drawn-out, scratching sound makes you feel the snow sanding the surface of the logs. As the snow level piles up in front of the window, outside sounds gradually become muffled, softened by a dampening effect. Snow is one of nature's best sound insulators. As it slowly blankets the house like a quilt, the sound of the wind begins to come from deeper, farther away. Amidst this acoustic chaos, the inside of your bed is the quietest spot on earth. Paradoxically, the noise outside empties your mind. Because when the storm rages, no living thing can move outside. No wolf howl, no horse whinny, no footsteps of approaching danger can be heard. The sound of the storm is a white noise wall that swallows all other dangerous sounds. Therefore, the storm's fiercest moment is actually when you are safest in the Wild West. That monotonous roar erases thoughts from your mind, slows your heart rate, and surrenders you to a deep, dreamless sleep in the very center of that great noise. Now you take refuge in your tiny world on wheels, under the curved canvas roof of your wagon. If you didn't have time to build a permanent log cabin, or if you are still in the middle of that endless journey westward, your shelter tonight is merely a thick, oil-hardened cloth stretched over wooden bows. The walls of a log cabin have the mass to stop the wind and hold heat to some extent. But inside the wagon, the only thing standing between you and that freezing universe outside is a linen fabric not even a finger's width thick. This cloth blocks the wind. It prevents snow from pouring in, but offers almost no resistance to the invisible, ghostly passage of cold. Lying in your bed, you know that the taut fabric just a hand's breadth above your head has equalized to the temperature of the outside air, sub-zero. However, the real torture of sleeping in wagons isn't just the cold, but its most insidious sibling, moisture. The wagon's interior volume is very small. You, your spouse, your children, and perhaps a few valuable animals breathe together inside this narrow tunnel. The warm vapor you exhale with every breath rises and hits that icy, cold canvas roof. By the ruthless workings of physics, when warm breath meets a cold surface, it condenses instantly. First, a thin fog layer forms. Then this layer combines into water droplets, or if the air is cold enough, a thin layer of frost. While in log cabins, wood absorbs and balances moisture, the oiled canvas does not absorb moisture, it accumulates it on its surface. Around midnight, you startle awake from a cold, wet drop falling on your face. Even if it isn't snowing outside, a hidden rain formed from your own breath has begun inside. This phenomenon, called condensation, causes the quilts on your bed, your clothes, to gradually and unnoticeably become damp. Dealing with dry cold is possible by layering clothing. But wet cold, dampness, is a thief that steals the insulating properties of even your thickest wool blanket, seeping into your very bones. As you turn in your sleep, you feel the edge of your pillow dampen, your quilt grow heavier. Even the air you draw into your lungs feels heavy. The dense, suffocating smell of mold, wet wool, old leather, and extinguished lamp oil fills your sinuses. Sleeping in this environment is like trying to breathe underwater. Your body has to expend twice as much energy to heat this humid air compared to dry air. The cold air rising from the wagon floor, from the space between the wheels, penetrates the thin wooden planks while the cold moisture dripping from above traps you between two fires. When you wake in the morning, you see the wagon canvas's inner surface completely covered in white crystals. Every breath you gave throughout the night hangs frozen above your head like a work of art. When you move or the wind shakes the canvas, this icy powder falls onto your bed, your face. Yet this small, damp cave gives a strange sense of security. Rather than being completely defenseless in the infinite void outside, breathing that dense air filled with your family's warmth and breaths inside this damp tent is proof you are alive. As the wagon canvas gently billows and deflates with the wind, you feel as if you are inside the belly of a giant living creature. This rhythmic movement and that heavy, damp air numb your mind, slow your thoughts, and drag you into a deep, necessary sleep despite all the wetness. In the middle of the night, you are pulled from the deepest pit of dreamless sleep not by a loud noise, but by a silent, urgent alarm from the extremities of your body. When you open your eyes, you are met with the pitch darkness of the room. But what occupies your mind is not this darkness. It's the terrifying numbness you feel where your feet are. Under the quilt, your feet no longer feel like limbs belonging to you but like two heavy blocks of ice or cold stone sculptures, foreign objects attached to your body later. In the merciless winters of the Wild West, this numbness isn't simple cold, it is the first and most insidious harbinger of frostbite danger. Your blood circulation has concentrated in the center to keep your vital organs warm, abandoning the extremities to their fate. Now what you must do is bring life back to your feet without compromising the warm cocoon feeling of your bed. It's a delicate rescue operation you must manage with your sleepy mind. Your first strategy is the most primitive and instinctive one, friction. You rub your feet together, against the texture of your coarse wool socks, or against the bed's hard linen surface with a slow but determined rhythm. This movement is an effort to convert mechanical energy into heat energy. As your muscles contract, they try to pump warm blood flow downward from your calves. In this process, the first return signal you feel in your toes is not relief but a sharp tingling and pinprick pain. According to the medical understanding of the era, this pain was celebrated as the return of life. Because if there is pain, the tissues are still alive. If there was no pain, that's when the real fear began. But the most effective strategy, applied like an unwritten rule among Wild West families, is the heat-borrowing method. If you share the bed with a spouse, sibling, or travel companion, you slowly and carefully extend your ice-cold feet toward the other person's legs, especially the calf or back of the knee area where warmth is most concentrated. This moment of contact is a shocking cold for the other person but an indescribable salvation for you. While this act might be considered rude in the modern world, in the survival ethics of that era, it was a silent pact of mutual aid. The other person, even if slightly startled in their sleep, does not pull their leg away. because they know that warming your feet tonight is the guarantee of finding the same warmth when their own feet freeze tomorrow night. It is a sharing of biological radiators. If you are alone, your strategy is to assume the fetal position. You draw your knees up to your stomach, grasp your feet with your hands, and press them against your body's warmest core, the abdominal cavity. By massaging your own frozen pieces of flesh with your own hands, you transfer heat from your own center. This position minimizes heat loss by reducing surface area. Sometimes, if the heated stone at the foot of your bed is still lukewarm, though it's usually cold by dawn, you send your feet hopefully searching for the stone's remaining warmth. As your feet slowly begin to warm, that deep ache gives way to a sweet, heavy numbness. The dilation of blood vessels creates a sensation in the soles of your feet as if a mild fire is burning from within. This is the signal that the danger has passed and circulation has returned to normal. You tuck the quilt tightly under your feet to block even the slightest air current from outside. Now your feet have returned to the same temperature frequency as the rest of your body. This small victory grants you permission for a few more hours of uninterrupted sleep until morning. Your mind, focusing on the throbbing warmth rhythm in your feet, falls back into the dark, safe void, into the arms of sleep. You are standing on an invisible boundary in the very center of your room. Although the interior of this one-room log cabin appears to be a homogeneous living space from the outside, it is actually a wild thermal geography divided into invisible climate zones. In the Wild West in winter, the inside of a house is never at a single temperature. This is a world full of contrasts, where polar cold and desert heat exist side by side, just a few steps apart. When you turn your face toward the heart of the room, that roaring cast iron stove, what you feel on your cheeks is almost scorching radiant heat. The area immediately within 1 meter of the stove is where the house experiences its summer, sometimes even scorching, air so dry and thin it could rival a blacksmith's forge. Standing here, you feel the pores on your skin opening, the wool clothes on you beginning to suffocate. This corner is the center of life, cooking, and conversation. But staying here long creates an intense energy field that dries your sinuses and causes headaches. However, when you turn your back and start walking toward the farthest point from the stove, usually that dark corner directly facing the north wind, you witness the seasons change with every step. With the first step, the heat turns to a pleasant warmth. With the second step, the air cools. And with the third step, the familiar, sharp winter chill greets you. This distant corner of the room is the house's refrigerator zone. Here, you can see with the naked eye the white frost crystals and ice layer formed on the inner wall at those blind spots in the joints between logs where the stove's heat never reaches. While your breath is invisible near the stove, when you come to this corner, it emerges from your mouth as a white vapor cloud. Looking at the architectural conditions of the period, the standard, even temperature comfort created by central heating systems in modern homes was unimaginable back then. Heat radiated from a source and, as distance increased, rapidly disappeared, obeying the laws of physics. Therefore, while one end of the room could make you sweat, the other could freeze water. This thermal imbalance was the main factor determining the living arrangement, and even the sleeping hierarchy inside the house. When beds were laid out at night, everyone's eyes were on that temperate zone within the stove's golden circle. The eldest or sickest would settle in that strategic middle point where they would benefit most from the stove's heat without being scorched, while the younger and more resilient were pushed toward the shadowy edges where cold seeping from the walls reigned. If you are sleeping in that far corner, when your face is turned to the wall, you feel the tip of your nose freezing. But when you turn your back to the room, you try to catch that faint wave of heat from afar. The ice sheet on the water bucket standing in the coldest corner of the room is the most concrete proof of this difference in the morning. While the kettle on the stove boils, the water just 5 meters away freezes, showing how intense this microclimate war inside the house is. This corner also functions as a natural pantry where food can be stored without spoiling. Meat, milk, and butter are safe here. So, here, cold is both an enemy and a servant. As the night progresses and the stove slows, the cold from that distant corner advances toward the center of the room like a glacial wave. The warm area shrinks and eventually, by dawn, is pushed right up to the stove's base. You are now lying in your bed on that delicate balance line between these two extremes. Your head is in a cool air current, while your feet stretch toward the last of the stove's warmth. The air currents inside the room are in constant motion like an invisible river, with warm air rising to the ceiling and flowing down the cold walls to the floor. This circulation drifts over your face like a light breeze. Between the scorching memory of the fire on one side and the silent threat of ice on the other, your body, trying to find its own thermal balance, surrenders to the rules of this wild room and falls asleep. Now you tightly grasp that coarse, perhaps chipped ceramic bowl or tin mug that's becoming difficult to hold due to the heat. The hot porridge or bone broth you just ladled from the pot simmering on the stove's last embers means much more to you than just an evening meal flavor. It is the fuel supply for the biological stove that will work throughout the night. In the Wild West, especially on freezing winter nights, going to bed hungry wasn't just uncomfortable. It was thermal suicide. Your body would expend tremendous energy to stay warm in that icy room until morning, and it needed one last boost to provide that energy. That thick cornmeal mush, or fatty broth with a bit of dried meat, as you spoon it, draws a physical warmth line down your throat. With every swallow, you feel that warmth pass through your esophagus, reach your stomach, and radiate from there to your entire body's core. This sensation is different from external stove heat. This is an internal, combustion-driven warmth. In the modern world, eating heavy meals right before sleep is considered unhealthy and avoided. But under the harsh conditions of that era, it was a vital strategy. Because when the digestive system starts working, the body expends energy to break down this food, and this chemical process releases thermogenesis as a byproduct. In other words, that hot meal you send to your stomach is actually the trigger for the heat your body will produce throughout the night. The animal fats and heavy carbohydrates in the food are like slow-burning logs. Unlike kindling that flares and dies quickly, these nutrients are processed slowly in your system until morning, pumping a steady warmth into your bloodstream. When you curl up inside your bed, that feeling of fullness in your stomach gives you an indescribable heaviness and lethargy. Blood flow concentrates in your digestive system, your body's center. This slows the thoughts in your brain, makes your eyelids heavy, and causes the external stimuli keeping you awake to fade. The satiety from that hot porridge creates a primitive sense of satisfaction. The old instinctual message, "I hunted, I ate, and now I am safe," calms your nervous system. Sometimes, a cup of hot herbal tea or, if available, hot milk sweetened with a little honey drunk right after the meal is the final touch of this internal warming ritual. The warmth of the mug heats your palms while the liquid inside expands that warm pool in your stomach. No matter how harshly the wind blows outside, the small fire burning inside you will not go out until morning. When you pull your quilt over you, you know your body works silently and efficiently like a machine with the energy from that last bite. That warmth in your stomach may not reach your toes, but it shields your torso where vital organs are located. And with this internal assurance, knowing hunger or cold won't wake you, you peacefully surrender to that deep, dark winter sleep. You have entered the deepest, most silent, and most dangerous hour of the night, the hour of the wolf, just before dawn breaks. In this phase where the concept of time blurs and dreams intertwine with reality, what separates you from your sleep is not a noise but a sudden, sharp change in the room's atmosphere. The last ember in the stove you lit in the evening and fed at midnight has now completely died. That reassuring pile of iron has transformed from a heat-radiating friend into ice-cold metal absorbing the cold. The house has lost the thermal war it fought all night, and that wild, merciless cold outside now seeps inside unimpeded through walls, floor, and ceiling, right up to your bedside. Statistically, these are the critical hours when the most freezing deaths occurred in the Wild West, when the elderly and sick were most vulnerable, and when the body's resistance was at its lowest. Inside your bed, you feel the outer surface of your quilt has hardened as if petrified. The fabric, soft at the beginning of the night, has turned into a cold, rigid armor with the freezing of moisture in the air. Every breath you take through your nose is like a sharp knife strike descending into your lungs because the room's air temperature has now dropped below the freezing point of water. If you stick your head out from under the quilt and exhale, You can see your breath hanging in the air like a gray cloud and slowly settling onto your bed in the dim moonlight. Unlike the comfortable, unchanging temperature of modern homes fixed by thermostats, the temperature in this log cabin is born, lives, and dies in the morning like a living organism. You are now in the moment of that death, when absolute cold reigns. Your body activates its last defense mechanism against this assault, shivering. But this shivering isn't the superficial shudder you feel when awake. This is a deep, involuntary contraction shaking the bed, coming from the marrow of your bones. Your muscles begin burning energy stores to keep body heat and vital organs. Despite being in the sweetest part of sleep, you instinctively curl even tighter into the fetal position, drawing your knees to your chin, crossing your arms over your chest. This is a return to humanity's first safe state in the womb. It is the effort to stop heat loss by minimizing surface area. The outside world is also at its quietest at this hour. Even the wind seems to have frozen still. This dead silence psychologically amplifies the cold's severity. You feel as if time has frozen and you will remain in this ice coffin forever. The cracking sounds from the room's corners are signs of the wood contracting and splitting from the cold. Even the house itself is reacting to this cold. The small heat bubble you've accumulated under the quilt is your only living space. Since the slightest movement might open the edge of the quilt and let that icy air rush in, you try to remain almost motionless, even while breathing. This moment is the greatest test of your will. Your logic tells you to get up and relight the stove, but your body refuses to venture into that freezing void. The thought, "I can endure a little longer until the sun rises," echoes in your mind. This waiting is actually a part of the patience and endurance training of the Wild West settler, repeated every night. With your eyes closed, feeling only the weight of the blanket and your own heartbeat, you wait for nature's harshest blow to pass, for the sun's first weak light to hit the window. Until that moment comes, the cold is your only companion, your only reality. In the deepest, most vulnerable moment of the night, while your mind wanders in the misty world of dreams, your body starts a war on its own, without your permission. This war is called shivering. In the merciless winters of the Wild West, when the warmth under the quilt fell below the vital threshold, a primitive center deep in your brain sent an emergency signal. Even if you think you are still asleep, your muscles obey this command and begin to contract rhythmically and violently, involuntarily. This isn't just a light shudder, it's a mechanical earthquake shaking your entire skeleton, making your teeth chatter, and causing the bed to creak. This tremor is your body's last resort. It tries to generate heat through friction by rubbing muscle fibers against each other. But the effect of this effort on sleep quality is a silent disaster. When shivering begins, the deep, restorative sleep phase, REM sleep, is abruptly cut off. What modern medicine knows but the people of that era only experienced as waking up tired is this truth. While the body shivers, the brain can never enter full rest mode. Because shivering is physical exercise. Although you think you are lying motionless in bed, you actually expend as much energy as if you had run miles. Your leg muscles, back, and jaw muscles contract and relax dozens of times per second, consuming enormous calories. In conditions where food was scarce in winter and every calorie was worth its weight in gold, this energy expended during sleep left you feeling exhausted, not refreshed, upon waking. It was as if you had chopped wood or walked in the snow all night. A strange ache in your joints, the heavy pain of lactic acid buildup in your muscles. During this process, your dreams also change. The physical stress of your body seeps into your mind. You no longer see peaceful green meadows or warm summer days. The physical discomfort created by shivering transforms your dreams into dark, cold, and chaotic scenarios. In your dreams, you constantly run from something, get lost in a storm, or fall into icy waters. This is your brain's effort to tell you in dream language about the freezing danger your body is experiencing. Your mind keeps you in a half-awake limbo, in shallow sleep, without fully waking you. In this gray area, you are either fully awake nor fully asleep. You hear the sound of the wind outside, the creak of the bed, and the chattering of your own teeth, but you can't find the strength to intervene. In the modern world, you could turn a thermostat and solve this problem in seconds. But in the Wild West, Shivering is the get up and do something warning. If the shivering stops and is replaced by a sweet, warm feeling, that might not be recovery but the final stage of hypothermia, the beginning of freezing to death. This fear keeps your brain constantly on alert. Therefore, winter sleep in that era wasn't an uninterrupted block but a fragmented, restless process constantly interrupted by these shivering fits. When morning comes, even if your body is warm, your mind is foggy. You get out of bed where you lay down to rest like a soldier who has fought a battle. The jarring effect of shivering wears down the nervous system. The irritability, focus problems, and intolerance that will last all day are actually the legacy of that invisible struggle throughout the night. That shivering fit under the quilt is nature's way of telling you, I am the boss here. You are just a guest trying to survive. When you open your eyes, you witness a work of art nature has silently crafted overnight on the walls, illuminated by the pale, ghostly light of dawn or the first gray glimmer seeping into the room. From where you lie, looking at the surface of the roughly hewn logs at your bedside, you notice that the texture, which was wood last night, has now been replaced by a silvery, crystalline coating. This is interior frost. In the harsh winters of the Wild West, the thermal barrier between the inside and outside of the house is so weak that the cold from outside seeps through the logs, nails, and cracks, freezing the moisture inside into a physical map. Unlike the bone-dry, sterile environment provided by double-glazed windows or insulated walls in modern homes, here the walls breathe, and that breath freezes overnight, becoming visible. These ice crystals don't form randomly. They are markers of the house's weakest points of heat loss, the thermal bridges. Focus particularly on the heads of the large iron nails binding the logs together. Since metal conducts heat much faster than wood, it instantly carries the outside cold inside. Therefore, each nail head is covered with a pure white ice cap, appearing like white buttons hanging on the wall. As you breathe in and out in your warm bed, the warm, moist air from your lungs circulates in the room and eventually meets this metal coldness. At that moment of contact, the water vapor suspended in the air undergoes sublimation, transitioning directly from gas to solid without becoming liquid. This physical transformation means each of your breaths becomes a permanent mark on the wall. Examining the shapes of the crystals, you see traces of a microscopic forest. Fern-like curls, delicate extensions resembling bird feathers, and sharp-angled geometric patterns spread across the rough surface of the logs. This scenery is aesthetically fascinating, almost hypnotic. It's as if an invisible painter, the legendary Jack Frost, entered the room overnight with a fine brush and left his signature on the coldest corners. But for the people of that era, this beauty was also the aesthetic of danger. Because these crystals are visual proof that the house's insulation has failed, that the lethal cold outside has breached the defensive line and entered. This ice layer on the wall's surface even changes the room's acoustics. Wood's soft, sound-absorbing nature gives way to the hard, sound-reflecting surface of ice. The sound of the wind outside echoes off these icy surfaces with a more metallic, higher-pitched tone. If you dare to take your hand out from under the quilt and touch that wall, what you feel on your fingertips is not just cold but also a sticky, dry texture. The heat from your finger instantly melts those tiny crystals, leaving only a dark, damp wood stain. This small melt is a preview of what will happen when the stove is lit in the morning. When the sun rises and the stove roars to life, all these beautiful crystals will melt into water and trickle down the walls like tears, wetting the floor. This cycle is an insidious process leading to the gradual rot of the logs over time. But for now, in this silent hour of the night, they are just glittering ornaments. Watching this scenery from the safe warmth of your bed gives you a strange peace. The fact that the chaos outside could only enter in this fragile, brittle form is your victory. Being able to see how cold the air inside the room is makes you better appreciate the value of the warmth under your quilt. As you turn your eyes away from this silvery enchantment and close them again, you return to your dreams, knowing those icy flowers on the walls await you. Now, in the dim light of the room, lying on your back, you focus your mind on an atmosphere where the concept of private space has been completely erased, replaced by the intense, inevitable reality of communal living. Set aside the luxury of thick-walled, locked-door separate bedrooms offered by the modern world. Because in the Wild West cabin you are in now, privacy is built not with brick and mortar, but only with a thin printed cloth curtain, or the invisible veil provided by darkness. In this single room, typically not exceeding 15 square meters, you, your spouse, and your children breathe the same air, go to bed at the same time, and share the same silence. While this may seem like physical crowding, for the people of that era, it was a subtle social art that had to be developed. Looking at the room's geography, you see the parents' bed, your bed, usually in the most sheltered corner of the room, perhaps separated by a patched curtain hung from a rope stretched to the ceiling. This curtain can never provide the silence or security of a wall, but it draws a symbolic boundary. The curtain's fabric might be sewn from old flour sacks or perhaps from precious floral print calico brought from the East. While you are in your bed, the stove's light falling on this fabric casts shadows of life on the other side onto the curtain like a puppet show. You hear your children's breathing, the rustles they make turning in their beds, or their whispers when startled by the wind's sound, as if they were right next to your ear. This acoustic transparency makes privacy impossible but tightens family bonds so much that you cannot sleep without feeling each other's presence. Looking at the social norms of the period, in the Wild West, privacy wasn't a physical barrier but a behavioral code. Family members perfected the ability to ignore or not hear. When someone was dressing or washing, others turning their faces to the fire or closing their eyes was an unwritten, rigid rule. This could be called civil inattention. When you whisper with your spouse in bed, the children lying just a meter away pretending to be in deep sleep or truly passing out from exhaustion is the only thing that makes life sustainable in this cramped space. Although the strict moral codes of the Victorian era clashed with these wild living conditions on the frontier, when darkness fell, everyone adhered to this silent pact. The furniture in the room was also part of this privacy construct. A tall wardrobe or stacked trunks rose in the middle of the room like an artificial wall, cutting off visual contact. Sometimes, if there was a ladder to the loft, children slept on straw beds up there. While this provided vertical separation, since the loft floor was usually made of spaced planks, the heat and light rising from below still connected the living spaces. This interconnectedness gives you a strange peace as you fall asleep. Against the vast, deserted, dangerous darkness outside, this human density inside is a psychological fortress. The sounds of life coming from every corner, snores, breathing, bed creaks, continuously transmit the message to your brain. We are still here. We are alive and together. The loss of privacy becomes the gain of security. You are now in your shadowy world behind that curtain, falling into the world's most crowded yet safest sleep to the communal lullaby of your family's breathing rhythms. In the final act of the night, in your last waking moments before surrendering to sleep, your hands involuntarily reach for the heaviest yet most necessary object in the room, the cast iron pot or wide-based copper basin filled with water. This isn't just a kitchen task in the arid, freezing winters of the Wild West. It is atmospheric conditioning engineering that will last until morning. The mass of water you place on the stove will be your silent protector and climate controller throughout the night. Placing the pot on the stove's flat top surface, directly over the liveliest part of the fire, the dull thud sound it makes is like a gong announcing the end of the day. The water inside may have been carried from the creek with great effort in the afternoon, or obtained by melting clean snow accumulated in front of the house. Whatever its source, that water is now ready to meet the stove's aggressive heat. The dry heat radiated by the stove was one of the biggest health problems of that era. Cast iron heated the air while ruthlessly drying out moisture, lowering the room's relative humidity to desert levels. This dryness could parch your throat overnight, make your nose bleed, and cause you to wake up with that painful cough in the morning. This is exactly where the water on the stove comes into play. As the water heats, the thin, almost invisible columns of steam rising from its surface mix with the room's dried-out air. Lying in your bed, you feel how this steam softens the room's atmosphere, making breathing easier. This simple physical phenomenon is the ancestor of modern humidifiers. But here, there's no sound of an electric motor, only the light, meditative hiss of water heating. This water's other vital duty is pre-sleep bodily cleansing. Right before getting into bed, you pour some of this warmed water into a small basin and dip a clean cloth into it. When the water's warmth saturates the cloth's texture, wiping that cloth over your face, neck, and hands brings a relief that takes away all the day's stress. Defying the sub-zero temperatures outside, this hot water opening your pores and keeping blood circulation at the surface is a small luxury connecting you to civilization. Under the conditions of the era, taking a full bath in winter was a luxury possible perhaps once a week, or even once a month. But this sponge bath ritual was a small luxury repeated every night. Going to bed with the feeling of cleanliness from the steam of the warm, wet cloth psychologically prepares the ground for more peaceful sleep. Additionally, this water mass acts as a heat battery. Water absorbs and loses heat much more slowly than metal or air. Even as the stove begins to die down, the water in the pot is still warm and continues to radiate low-intensity heat into the room. When you wake in the morning and everything in the room, even the water in the bucket, is frozen, seeing that the water in this pot on the stove is still lukewarm and liquid gives you a great advantage starting the day. You can wash your face with that water, immediately prepare your coffee or porridge. Not having to struggle with breaking ice is the first victory of that freezing morning. Now, lying in your bed, you listen to the fine, vibrating sound the water makes as it approaches boiling point on the stove. The water isn't boiling, it's just singing. This sound is an irregular yet calming frequency filling the room's silence. The slightly moist smell of steam mixes with the sooty smell of burning wood, hanging in the air. This ritual, using water's transformative power, turns that harsh, angular log cabin into a breathable, livable, soft home. And with the security of knowing your throat won't dry out and your morning water is ready, you close your eyes in peace. In the middle of the night, if you have to leave the safe boundaries of your warm bed, perhaps to drink water or throw another log on the stove, the surface your feet will touch determines the comfort level of the house and the nature of your struggle with the cold. If you are a new immigrant to the Wild West and have hastily built your first cabin, your feet will likely step on a compacted dirt floor. No matter how leveled and swept, this dirt floor is actually a bare, merciless extension of the frozen ground outside into the house. Soil retains moisture, and that moisture freezes overnight, turning the floor into an ice rink. The cold you feel when stepping on that ground isn't just superficial, it's a wet, dark cold from the depths, from the underground, aching your bones. It's nature's way of telling you, you are still on me. You can't escape. However, if you are lucky and have a wooden floor in your cabin, typically a puncheon floor, made of logs split in half and laid with the flat side up, this is a great victory of civilization against the cold. When you get out of bed and step on these wooden planks, what you feel is still cold, yes. But it's not the sticky, wet cold of earth, it's the dry, honest coolness of wood. Wood literally lifts you off the world. It raises you above that frozen crust. The few inches of dead air space under the planks creates an invisible insulation cushion between you and the ground. The earth's endless heat-absorbing power slows upon hitting wood's fibrous structure. These wooden floors also have their own character and sound. As you take steps, you hear the logs flexing slightly on the joists, rubbing against each other with muffled creaks. Unlike the quiet, dead absorbency of an earth floor, the wooden floor responds to your movements. It makes you feel the house is alive. But these planks don't join flawlessly like modern parquet. Over time, the drying wood shrinks, creating gaps as thick as a finger between the planks. These gaps are the most insidious enemy of winter nights. The cold air rising from that cold storage under the house shoots up through these gaps into the room like thin, sharp jets of cold air from a geyser. So, having a wooden floor alone isn't enough. It needs to be dressed. The women of that era laid colorful rag rugs knitted from old clothes or animal hides from hunts on these strategic spots, by the bedside and in front of the stove. You are now standing not on those cold planks but perhaps on a bearskin or a thick wool rug. The soft texture under your feet traps that rising cold air current from below. The wood's dryness and the rug's insulation make you feel the threat from the ground is under control. Unlike the polished, varnished floors in eastern cities of the era, the floor you stand on is rough, perhaps splintered, and uneven. But this roughness is a sign of its sturdiness. While your neighbor with a dirt floor wakes up to a swollen, muddy floor from dampness every morning, you are on a dry, sweepable platform. When you return to bed, lifting your feet off the ground and pulling them under the quilt, the relief you feel isn't just about warming up. It's the psychological peace of moving away from that cold, dark earth, the underworld, to being on a human-made, safe island above. The wooden floor is a simple yet impassable boundary drawn between you and the wild nature. And sleeping on this boundary makes you feel at home, even in the lap of winter. Now, in the freezing cold of the room, focus on your most intimate and closest protector clinging tightly to your skin, that one-piece woolen union suit. Known in Wild West literature as the Long Johns, this thick, red or gray textured garment is completely different from the modern world's pajama concept. It's not just sleepwear, it's a second skin that merges with your body throughout the winter season, almost never removed. As you turn in your bed, you feel the slightly itchy yet reassuring friction this coarse wool creates on your skin. This texture, which could be uncomfortable when first worn, transforms over time into armor your nerve endings get used to, making you feel naked and vulnerable without it. This union suit's engineering reflects the simple yet functional intelligence of the era. Covering your body from ankles to neck in a single piece, this jumpsuit eliminates the most critical point where cold air could sneak in, the waist gap. Unlike modern two-piece pajamas, when you turn in bed at night, your waist doesn't get exposed. The fabric stretches with your movements, but never lets your skin touch the cold air. The tightly knit cuffs at the wrists and ankles act as gaskets preventing your body heat from escaping. Even when you move, this garment traps the warm air your body produces between skin and fabric, keeping you in an atmosphere enveloped by your own heat. In the Wild West, where bathing in winter was a major logistical operation and health risk, these union suits were typically put on at the start of winter and rarely removed until the first warm days of spring. While this thought contradicts modern hygiene understanding and the survival reality of that era, it was a thermal necessity. The garment conformed to your body's shape over time. The knees and elbows loosened, becoming an organic part aging with you. The button flap in the back, the drop seat, offered a practical solution for toilet needs while eliminating the risk of removing the entire garment, exposing your whole body to the freezing cold. Lying under the weight of your quilt, you notice how this wool layer warms you, keeping the blood in your veins flowing warmly. Wool is one of nature's rare materials that retains its insulating properties even when wet. So, even if you sweat at night or are exposed to the wagon's damp air, this union suit won't make you cold. On the contrary, it absorbs moisture, keeping you warm. While a cotton garment could freeze you, this wool armor is your greatest assurance, protecting you from becoming a damp, cold grave. Your body rests within this coarse fabric like a warm, protected core, completely insulated from the merciless cold of the outside world. The fabric's distinctive smell, blended with wool's natural oil and the room's smoke scent, creates that familiar atmosphere reminding you you're alive. And in the lethargy provided by this warmth, you fall asleep in an itchy yet affectionate embrace. In the most silent and vulnerable moment of the night, as the howl of the wind outside subsides, you begin to hear that disturbing, irregular yet persistent sound pulling you from the depths of your sleep. Drip, drip, drip. This sound is a small yet nerve-wracking game nature plays with you. The tons of snow accumulated on the roof of your log cabin or makeshift shack doesn't just remain as a silent insulation layer. It also interacts with the heat produced by the stove burning inside, undergoing an insidious physical transformation. The heat seeping up through the chimney and attic spaces slowly melts the bottom layer of the snow mass on the roof, the part touching the shingles. But the air outside is so cold that the melting ice refreezes when it reaches the roof's eaves, forming an ice dam. The remaining water has nowhere to go. Its only recourse is to obey gravity and seep through the millimeter gaps between the wooden shingles, shakes, into your warm home. This leakage isn't a noisy waterfall like a modern plumbing leak. On the contrary, it's a slow, methodical, unstoppable dripping process reminiscent of Chinese water torture. Lying in your bed, you can imagine the water accumulating at a dark point on the ceiling, creeping insidiously along a wooden beam, searching for the most suitable spot to fall. And that spot, according to Murphy's Law, usually lands right over your bed or over the most valuable item in the middle of the room. When the first drop hits your quilt, the solid sound it makes on the fabric and the spreading wetness startle you awake. If you're unlucky, that cold, sooty drop falls directly on your forehead or cheek. That means being torn from your warm sleep with an icy shock. The water isn't clear. Mixed with soot, dust, and wood tannins from the roof, it leaves a dark brown stain. Getting out of bed to deal with this leakage is one of the most unpleasant tasks to be done at midnight. In the room's gloom, you find a bowl from the kitchen, a copper pot, or a rusty tin bucket and place it under the dripping spot. When the first drop hits the metal bottom, the sharp metallic ping sound echoes in the silent room like a gunshot. Second drop, third drop. The sound changes over time. As the container fills, its tone becomes duller, turning into a plop-plop. Looking at the roofing techniques of the era, we see there were no modern waterproofing membranes or tar paper under the hand-hewn cedar shingles. As wood absorbs water, it swells. But upon reaching saturation, it releases the water as is. So once a leak starts, it doesn't stop until the snow on the roof is gone or the stove goes out and the roof refreezes. This situation might require moving your bed. Trying to drag the heavy wooden bedstead, creaking, to a safe, dry corner in that cramped room is physical torment. After you manage to pull it and lie down again, a new instrument has been added to the room's acoustics: the rhythm of water dripping into the bucket. After a while, this sound creates a metronome effect in your brain. You start counting the intervals between drips. Sometimes the wind blows, and the leakage slows. Sometimes the stove flares, and the drips quicken. This irregular rhythm makes it hard to fall asleep, but you get used to it after a while. The sound of water is like a timepiece flowing inside the house. Watching that wet stain on the ceiling slowly grow is the picture of helplessness. Where that water enters, cold air also enters. But the moisture created by that water makes the air in the room even heavier. The smell of dampness mixes with the smell of burning wood. By dawn, as the bucket nears fullness, the sound of water becomes completely muffled. Surrendered to this inevitable natural event, with the consolation that drops aren't falling on your head, you return to your restless sleep under the damp, cool cover, to the lullaby mixed with the sound of water. That bucket is your night watchman, a silent servant collecting the ceiling's tears. On the roughly hewn log nightstand by your bedside, your gaze is fixed on that single, trembling, feeble but stubborn light source, the tallow candle or the oil lamp burning behind its sooty glass chimney. While the rest of the room is swallowed by the thick, tangible darkness in the corners, this small flame creates a warm golden halo around it. In the modern world, lighting is merely a visual phenomenon. LED bulbs are cold and only allow you to see. But in the Wild West, light also means heat. Every burning wick is a miniature stove. When you reach your hand out from under the quilt and bring your palms close to this flame, you feel the surprisingly intense heat radiated by that tiny fire. Unlike the crude power of the giant stove in the room, this is a delicate, focused, intimate warmth. If you are lucky and have an oil lamp, that lamp's glass chimney is the most critical part of this heating process. The flame at the wick's tip is trapped inside the glass, and this thin glass cylinder reaches a scorching temperature in seconds. The glass absorbs heat from the flame and then radiates it outward, to your face and hands. This glass chimney actually acts as a small transparent radiator. When you hold your hand not on the glass but beside it, you feel that wave upon wave of warm air current spreading, breaking the freezing air at your bedside a little. The fuel inside the lamp is usually kerosene or, cheaper, heavily odorous whale oil. The energy released during combustion may not be enough to change the room's overall temperature, but it creates a noticeable difference in your micro-world, that half-meter area of your pillow and face. However, most often, in the poor cabins on the frontier, lamp oil was an expensive luxury, and people relied on tallow candles. These candles were made at home by the women, by melting and pouring the internal fat of slaughtered cattle or sheep into molds. So what burns is actually an animal part. As the candle burns, it spreads a heavy, greasy smell reminiscent of slightly burnt meat or frying into the room. This smell might be bothersome to modern noses, but for the people of that era, it was the smell of home and safety. Tallow candles don't burn as cleanly as beeswax. They constantly sputter, leave soot, and if the wick isn't trimmed, snuffed, frequently, the flame can get out of control. This sputtering and the flame's constant dance create a hypnotic effect. As your eyes get lost in the flame's movements, your brain waves slow down. Your relationship with this source of light and heat is also a lesson in time management and economy. That drop of candle or oil is money or labor. Therefore, you can't burn it all night just to stay warm. This small heat source is only a temporary companion accompanying you until you get into bed and your body heat rises under the quilt. The dim, orange light it casts softens the cold log walls in the room, makes the frost-covered windows seem less threatening. Where the light falls is warm, where shadows remain is icy. And finally, when sleepiness really sets in, you must make that last move. You fill your lungs with that cold air and blow gently but firmly toward the flame, or pinch the wick with wet fingers to extinguish it. In that moment, the light and that tiny heat source in the room suddenly vanish. All that remains is a thin, curling smoke rising from the wick and its sharp, burning smell stinging your sinuses. This smell is the official announcement that the night has begun. When the light goes, darkness and cold pounce on you as if they were lying in wait. But under the effect of that tiny crumb of heat and visual peace you received until the last second, you have already closed your eyes, allowing the darkness to envelop you. Now the only heat source is your own body and the small world under your quilt. In the deepest, silent hours of the night you wake up, pulled from the peaceful arms of sleep by a disturbing feeling, the unbearable dryness in the roof of your mouth. Your tongue sticks to your palate. Your throat has turned into a dusty trail, and swallowing feels like sandpaper passing down your throat. In the Wild West, winter isn't just the snow and ice outside, it's also the relentless drought inside the house. Unlike the balanced air quality provided by humidifiers or central heating systems in modern homes, the air in your small log cabin is like a wild animal, thirsty. The cast iron stove burning all day and night consumes oxygen while drying out the last trace of moisture in the air. By the laws of physics, cold air has a very weak capacity to carry moisture. When the stove heats this air, what emerges is an extremely dry atmosphere that steals water from your lungs with every breath. While you think you are sleeping peacefully under your quilt, your body is actually fighting a silent war of water loss. Every warm breath from your mouth and nose expels your body's precious water reserves as vapor. The room's air is so arid that it instantly absorbs and destroys the moisture in your breath. Add to this the slight sweating under the weight of the quilts, and the body heat trapped in winter's thick clothes, and waking up with serious dehydration by dawn is inevitable. What you feel at that moment isn't simple thirst, it's the deep, primitive cry of your cells for water. At this point, the biggest obstacle you face is the logistical difficulty you must overcome to quench your thirst. In the modern world, reaching for a glass of water by your bedside is a matter of seconds. But here, your water source is a wooden barrel or metal bucket standing in the coldest corner of the room. Stepping from the warmth of your bed into that freezing darkness challenges your will. When you reach the corner of the room, you notice the water surface in the bucket is covered with a thin but hard layer of ice. Even the water has armored itself against the cold. Taking the metal dipper or ladle beside it, and hitting the ice layer, the crack sound is the only noise breaking the night's silence. Breaking the ice and reaching the black, freezing water beneath means overcoming another of nature's barriers. When you bring the dipper to your lips, the metal's coldness burns your lips. The first sip you take is near 0 degrees. As it goes down your throat, you feel a sharp coldness tracing your esophagus line, making you shiver from inside when it reaches your stomach. This shock may scatter your sleep for a moment, but the feeling of relief as the water spreads to your cells is priceless. While drinking, you also swallow the taste of the metal, the smell of the wooden bucket, and the aroma of soot in the room. This water isn't filtered or purified. It's natural, hard, and wild. After quenching your thirst, when you return to bed, your body starts expending energy again to warm that cold water. When you get under the quilt, the dryness in your throat is gone, replaced by a cool, moist feeling. But you know that as long as the stove keeps burning, the air will steal moisture again, and this cycle will repeat every night until winter ends. Accepting this inevitable physical reality, you fall back asleep with the temporary comfort of a moist throat. In the darkest, most sinister hour of the night, as you lie motionless in bed, Your ears are focused on the strange, deceptive silence of the outside world. Unlike the dusty, crowded, gunshot-echoing summer days of the Wild West, winter nights cast a deadly calm over the town. The meters of accumulated snow outside haven't just closed roads and paths. They also act as a giant acoustic sponge absorbing sound waves. The footsteps of someone walking on the town's famous wooden sidewalks, which echo clack in summer, are now transformed into a muffled, rustling, almost inaudible shhh sound under the snow. In the warmth of your bed, you are like a sentry trying to decipher what these muffled sounds mean. This silence is actually a double-edged sword. On one hand, it whispers that the town is isolated from bandits, drunken brawls, and the outside world. On the other hand, because it hides the sound of approaching danger until the last moment, it keeps you on alert. Your hand involuntarily reaches under your pillow or to the nightstand beside you for that cold, heavy metal object, the loaded revolver or rifle with a bullet in its chamber. The texture of the wood on the gun's grip, or the ice-cold touch of the metal sends a strange current of security through your body when it touches your fingertips. Looking at the law enforcement system of the era, even with a sheriff and deputies, on a stormy winter night, everyone is the defender of their own home, their own castle. There are no street lamps or patrolling watchmen like in eastern cities. Here, security is entrusted to your senses and the cold steel under your pillow. Another security threat brought by winter comes from nature itself, from hunger. Wolf packs, bears, or mountain lions unable to find food in the mountains dare to descend to the town's dumps or stables. Is that scratching sound you hear among the howl of the wind a thief forcing the door or a hungry wolf sniffing the logs? Making this distinction requires constant analysis in your mind. Sometimes a blood-curdling howl from afar provokes the town's dogs to bark. That's when you tense in bed. Because the dog's barking is the alarm that silence is broken and something foreign is prowling outside. But the cold is so severe that neither you nor the threat outside can take action for long. The cold declares a truce between parties. The wind passing in front of your window sometimes sounds like a human whistle. Sometimes it startles you by hitting the shutters of an empty house. The glass clinking of empty bottles rolling in the wind in the town's abandoned buildings, saloons, is ghostly. But you know in this weather, in this blizzard, even the most hardened outlaw must take refuge by a warm stove. The cold is the most effective sheriff lowering the crime rate. As time passes, your hand on the gun's grip relaxes. That thick layer of snow outside has actually cocooned and hidden your house. The fact that no one can approach you without leaving footprints provides relief. The stove's crackling inside begins to drown out those ambiguous, sinister sounds outside. Your mind becomes convinced. No one will come tonight. No one can come in this cold. That tense watchfulness gradually gives way to winter's forced, heavy sleep. The dangers outside are frozen under the snow, and you surrender yourself to the peaceful arms of that personal truce lasting until morning. Now, focus on that disturbing, fragmented, and exhausting cycle of sleeplessness besieging your mind in the deepest, most vulnerable hour of the night. In the Wild West, winter sleep was far from the 8-hour, uninterrupted, block rest luxury known to modern humans. Here, sleep was a constant negotiation with the cold, a silent vigil lasting all night. The sweet warmth you felt when first getting under the quilt is unfortunately not permanent. As the night progresses, the gap between the room's temperature and your body temperature widens, and this thermal imbalance constantly prods your brain's most primitive center, the survival instinct, pulling you to the surface of wakefulness. These awakenings usually occur not with a startle or sudden fear but with a slow, insidious awareness. In your dream, you might be on a warm summer day. But suddenly, the sharp sting on the tip of your nose, your ear, or your shoulder that escaped the quilt tears through the dream realm. Before opening your eyes, you feel your body contracting, shrinking even smaller into the fetal position. This is the first awakening. Your mind orders you. Fix your cover. The cold is getting in. With sleepy movements, you pull the quilt up to your chin, tuck the edges under you, and wait for your body heat to rise again. But in this process, sleep's precious rhythm, the REM cycle, is disrupted. Falling back asleep takes time because you have to warm the cool bed again. Just as you are deepening again, perhaps an hour later, the second awakening comes. This time, the cause is the stove beginning to die down and the room's air temperature falling below a critical threshold. The air you draw into your lungs is so cold it aches inside your nose. Your brain warns you of freezing risk. Move. Speed up circulation. You have to turn, change position inside the bed. But every movement disrupts that warm air bubble under the quilt and lets cold air in. This is the paradox. Move to warm up, but get cold when you move. This vicious circle repeats countless times throughout the night. This frequent awakening cycle creates mental fog. By dawn, you can no longer tell if you are awake or dreaming. The concept of time disappears. The sound of the wind outside the house's creaks, the shivering of the person next to you, each sound brings you to the edge of shallow sleep and leaves you there. While your body is physically in bed, your mind is constantly on alert. This state is a semi-awake winter sleep, a torpor-like state. Your metabolism slows to conserve energy. But you cannot fully rest. When you open your eyes in the morning, what you feel isn't refreshment but a heavy fatigue, as if you carried a load all night. This fatigue is the result of that silent wrestling match with the cold all night. Fragmented sleep strains your nerves, reduces your tolerance. But for the Wild West settler, this fatigue was the price of survival. If you hadn't woken up at all, you could have frozen to death in that sweet sleep. That disturbing cold waking you repeatedly is actually a merciless guard keeping you alive. And accepting this reality, you force your tired body out of bed with difficulty, ready to enter the same cycle again the next night. Now turn your gaze to the most remote points of your body, that distant geography where the warm blood pumped by your heart has the most difficulty reaching, your feet. Your feet, which have been stuffy inside those heavy leather boots all day, perhaps slightly dampened and tired, may want to gain freedom, to breathe a cool breath at this moment when you get into bed. You might imagine the freshness and sense of freedom of touching modern, smooth cotton sheets with bare feet. However, in this freezing log cabin of the Wild West, removing those thick, coarse, perhaps slightly skin-pricking hand-knitted wool socks would be one of the biggest strategic mistakes you could make. This act isn't just a comfort preference, it is a crime committed against your body's thermal integrity. Because those socks aren't just a clothing item, they are the final insulation gasket between you and that icy room. Focus on the texture of these socks. They aren't factory-produced, thin, delicate fabrics. They are knitted by the women of the house by the fireplace light, from unwashed raw wool over hours of labor. Being unwashed is critical, because the natural oil on the wool, lanolin, still remains on the fibers. This oily, dense texture makes the sock resistant to water and moisture. While you lie in bed, even if your feet sweat, the wool absorbs this moisture and draws it away from your skin but doesn't give a wet feeling. If you were wearing cotton socks or sleeping barefoot, the moisture formed would combine with the cold, turning your feet into blocks of ice. But this coarse wool, with the air bubbles it traps, creates a stable microclimate around your feet. Another vital reason for not removing the socks is the dead zone at the bottom of the bed. The foot of the quilt is the hardest area for body heat to reach, takes the longest to warm, and is where cold seeping from outside first hits. If you remove those socks, your bare skin touching that cold linen sheet or hard blanket will cause your body to go into shock. When your brain receives this sudden cold signal from your feet, it panics and decides to pool blood in the center, inside your torso. This means your feet get even colder, your sleep is broken, and a shivering fit that will last all night begins. In contrast, wool socks absorb this shock. Even if your feet touch a cold surface, the thick wool layer in between slows heat transfer and sends your brain the message that all is well. You must also consider that first, most difficult moment of the morning. Waking before sunrise when the water bucket in the room is frozen, and having to step from your warm bed onto the icy wooden floor at that moment. If you had taken your socks off at night, searching for those frozen, stiffened socks in the dark in the morning, trying to pull them onto your ice-cold feet, means starting the day defeated. Putting on a cold sock could be described as dress torture in that era. But if your socks are on your feet, when you get out of bed, the floor's cold doesn't affect you. You are ready. That wool, warmed by your body heat, continues to insulate you from the floor. Therefore, you allow those wool threads to slightly tighten your ankles, itch your heels, and restrict your toes. This feeling of discomfort is actually a reminder that you are safe. Sheltering in wool's coarse kindness is your logic's choice over the vulnerable cold nakedness would bring. If your feet are warm, your dreams will be warm too. And surrendering to this simple truth, with the presence of those thick protectors on your feet, you fall asleep defying winter's freezing breath. Now, from within your bed pushed into the darkest, most secluded corner where the log walls meet, you look at that pale square at the other end of the room, the window. That window you nestled right next to in summer to catch a cool breeze or benefit from daylight is declared the most dangerous, treacherous geographical region of the house when winter comes. Your bed's current location isn't an accidental placement. It is a vital strategy mandated by Wild West architecture and thermodynamics. Pulling your bed as far from that window as possible, into the interior parts of the room, is an effort to escape an invisible waterfall of cold that will pour over you all night. Because immediately in front of that thin glass or oiled paper is the house's internal freezing line. Looking at the windows of that era, we see a period when double-glazed, argon gas-filled, vacuum insulation technologies of the modern world weren't even dreamed of. Glass, if available, was an expensive and precious material. But it was usually handmade, wavy, and thin. Most frontier homes used oiled paper or thin leather instead of glass. These materials let light in but are no different from a sieve in retaining heat. When the outside air is minus 20 degrees Celsius, the window's inner surface is also near sub-zero. While you lie in your bed, you look at that window and know that right in front of that square, a silent air current cycle created by physics is at work. The room's warm air touching the window instantly cools and becomes heavier. This heavy air then flows down from the window's surface to the floor like a waterfall. If your bed were under the window, this invisible cold river would pour over your face and neck all night, making you shiver even under the quilt. Therefore, changing the placement of furniture in your room at the start of winter was a ritual. It was necessary to drag the heavy wooden bedstead, creaking, away from exterior walls and especially windows, leaning it against interior walls where the stove's heat spread more evenly and air currents were minimal. Your bed's current location gives you the confidence of being in a dead air zone. Here, the air is stagnant, doesn't move. That turbulent, cold air vortex in front of the window cannot reach you. Looking at the window from afar is like watching a stormy sea from the shore. You see the danger, but it cannot touch you. Additionally, staying away from the window has a radiation-related dimension. A cold surface tends to draw heat from a warm object opposite it. If you slept close to the window, even without an air current between you, you would continuously lose your body's heat to that icy surface. The glass would act like a black hole pulling your biological energy toward itself. But in the corner you are now in, the thick logs surrounding you offer a more neutral, temperate surface. Wood doesn't steal your energy like glass. On the contrary, it reflects it. Staying away from the window also provides acoustic comfort. The tapping sound of wind hitting the glass, the frame shaking, and the storm outside straining the window are frightening, sleep-disrupting sounds when nearby. But at the other end of the room, these sounds become muffled, distant. The window is the cold eye of the outside world looking into the house. And you are in a shadowy refuge that I cannot see, the wind cannot reach. This distance isn't just physical, it's psychological insulation. In the morning, when you look at that window, you'll see it completely covered in ice, with icicles forming on the inside. And at that moment, you'll understand once again how you protected your life by pulling your bed to that corner. Now, looking at the distant, icy glimmer of that window, grateful for the warmth of your nook, you drift deeper. In the final moments of the night, in that short, critical limbo before getting under the quilt, what you hold between your hands isn't just a drink, it's a liquid armor preparing you for the approaching freezing darkness. Clutched tightly in your palms, in that tin mug or thick glass steaming, is one of two options, either a sharp whiskey that will instantly ignite your spirit and blood, or a calming hot milk mixed with a little honey or molasses. In the harsh winters of the Wild West, this nightcap ritual wasn't so much a pleasure as an attempt to manually adjust your body's thermostat. Sitting in the stove's feeble light, Sipping this hot liquid is a rebellion started from within against the icy world outside. If your preference is for whiskey, as common as water in that era and seen as a medical necessity, the burning sensation you feel in your throat upon the first sip shocks your cold-numbed nerve endings awake with astonishing speed. As the alcohol goes down your esophagus, it's as if what you swallowed isn't a liquid but liquefied embers. The moment it reaches your stomach, a sudden, aggressive chemical reaction begins in your body. Your blood vessels rapidly dilate from the alcohol's effect, and your blood rushes from the depths of your body to the surface, to the skin. This causes your cheeks to flush, your hands and feet to suddenly warm. The false warmth you feel at that moment gives you the illusion of having conquered the cold. Actually, this is a dangerous gamble, because blood coming to the surface means the temperature of vital organs drops. But at that moment, the effect that stops you from shivering in that icy room and gives you that fake but sweet liquid blanket feeling is psychologically priceless. The drowsiness whiskey brings muffles the sound of the wind, blurs your worries, and pushes you into bed with a crude numbness. On the other hand, if you still have a milk-giving cow in your barn or could get fresh milk by barter from a neighbor, the effect of milk heated on the hearth is much more tender and lasting. When you pour the milk, warm just to be hot but not boiling, into a mug, the creamy, slightly burnt smell spreading through the room reminds you of childhood's safe days. Sipping the hot milk, you feel a velvety touch softening your throat, unlike whiskey's aggressive assault. The natural components and warmth in the milk create a heavy, satiating, peaceful mass in your stomach. This heaviness triggers that sweet sleep state, lethargy. Your body directs its energy to internal organs to digest this nourishment, and this produces metabolic heat. Milk doesn't warm you suddenly like whiskey, but fills you from inside with a balanced warmth lasting until morning. As your hands holding the mug absorb the drink's heat, the winter ache in your finger joints eases. Holding the steam rising from the mug's rim to your face moisturizes your dried nose and lips. This drink is the final timer before getting into bed. As the glass empties, the warmth will also slowly begin to fade. Therefore, the time between taking the last sip and getting under the quilt is like a race. You need to trap that warmth from the liquid inside under the quilt before it cools. Whether it's the reckless numbness whiskey gives or the maternal peace milk provides, whichever path you choose, that warmth in your stomach is your internal stove against the room's freezing air. When you lie down, the last aftertaste in your mouth, the oak and grain taste of whiskey or the fatty, sweet flavor of milk, whispers to you that all is well. This warm wave circulating in your blood is the first line of defense protecting you from shivering. And in the lap of this temporary yet vital warmth, you close your eyes, forgetting the storm outside. In the deepest, darkest point of the night, being torn from sleep's sheltered, warm harbor by an undeniable need of your body or a sinister sound from outside is the greatest test of what one can experience in Wild West winters. Curled under your quilt up to your chin, your mind tries to deny this necessity for a while. Maybe I can hold out until morning, you think. But nature's call or the sense of responsibility always wins this postponement game. That moment, the decision to get out of that warm bed and step into the -30°C wild void outside, isn't just a physical action, it's a mental trauma. The first second you throw off the quilt, the cold air in the room hits your body like a sledgehammer. But this is just the beginning. The leather boots you find by touch in the dark have turned into iron molds because they stayed away from the stove all night. Putting your foot into this frozen leather is like being clamped in an ice vise. The leather has hardened so much you have to strain your fingers to tie the laces. But your fingers have long since stopped obeying due to the cold. The thick fur overcoat or heavy wool jacket you put on doesn't warm you yet because it hasn't met your body heat. It just adds cold weight. Pulling the fur cap on your head down over your ears and reaching for the door's ice-encrusted metal latch, your heart rate quickens. Opening the door is a moment of physical violence. Since the hinges are frozen, you have to shoulder the door open. When the door cracks open, the wind rushing in isn't like a breeze airing the room, it's like a solid mass exploding in your face. Your breath is instantly cut off. When you step outside, the scenery greeting you is frighteningly beautiful and lethal. Moonlight reflecting off the endless snow cover turns the night into a silvery twilight. Everything, Trees, fences, distant hills are motionless figures of a frozen painting. The silence is so deep you feel a ringing, a pressure in your ears. With every step you take, the high, metallic crunch sound the snow makes is like a denunciation tearing the night's silence. The snow is so cold it has lost its moist, soft structure, becoming dry and abrasive like sand or glass dust. If your goal is to reach the small wooden toilet shack, the outhouse, 50 meters from the house, that walk feels like miles. The wind sneaks through the smallest openings in your overcoat, the cuffs, the collar, leaving fine stings on your skin like knife wounds. When you reach the shack, clearing the frost on the wooden seat and touching that icy surface is a moment that could send your body into shock. In those vulnerable seconds, a person feels smaller and more helpless than ever before nature. The return path is an escape. Seeing that feeble smoke rising from the house's chimney is the greatest hope in the world. When you enter the door again, you notice the moisture on your eyelashes and mustache has frozen into icicles. When you enter the warm room, these icicles melt, creating a burning sensation on your face. When you take off your boots and run back to bed, your body doesn't stop shivering immediately. That absolute cold outside has penetrated your bones, and getting rid of it takes time. But this short, painful trip reminds you once again of the value of your bed. After seeing that hell outside, the warm darkness under your quilt feels like a palace to you, and trembling yet grateful for having survived, you take refuge again in the arms of sleep. Good night.